In a dramatic geopolitical turn for Ukraine, President Donald Trump of the United States has backed off from using long-range Tomahawk missiles amid rising tensions between Ukraine and Russia and this ongoing war, which is soon going to approach its fourth year. All of this reportedly at the nudge of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, because he met Zelensky last week and just a day before that had a 2.5-hour-long conversation with Putin. And now Trump has had a very noisy meeting with Zelensky in which he has finally said no to the long-range missiles, and instead he has said he's preparing to meet with Putin in Hungary in the next couple of weeks. President Trump says he's doubtful if Ukraine can win this war. So what happened and where does that leave this almost 4-year war between Russia and Ukraine? US President Donald Trump had repeatedly floated the idea of selling long-range missiles to Ukraine that would allow Kiev to strike deep inside Russia. That was a view that he had floated, which would increase the leverage that Ukraine would have to force Russia to come to the negotiating table. And this was in the run-up to Ukrainian President Zelensky, who had scheduled a Friday meeting at the White House, hoping to finalize the acquisition of American Tomahawk missiles. But by Friday afternoon, President Zelensky left that meeting with President Trump disappointed. He told reporters that President Trump had insisted on keeping the Tomahawk missiles for America itself. The Ukrainian president would no longer talk about acquiring the Tomahawks, although both countries would continue discussing the issue.
We just had a call, as you know, with President Putin. I thought it was a very good call, so we'll talk about it maybe later. But it went very well.
But that was not how it was earlier in the week. Between Trump's comments on Tuesday about transferring long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine and Zelensky being let down on Friday, there was one pivotal moment. That was a lengthy phone call between Trump and President Vladimir Putin of Russia, who appeared to talk the American president out of this idea. It was the latest example of Trump altering his position after a personal interaction with Putin. He had acknowledged in the past that he has felt misled by the Russian president, but his frustration with Putin quickly dissipates. The same happened in Alaska earlier this year, and now this.
I have to say, we want Tomahawks also. We don't want to be giving away things that we need to protect our country.
In March, Trump had declared that he was very, very angry with Putin. In May, Trump had called Putin's attacks on Ukraine absolutely crazy. And then in July, Trump even vented to reporters that he believed that the Russian president was leading him on by promising to enter into peace negotiations, but he was never intending to follow through. But each and every single time, Trump has re-engaged with Putin, hoping to strike a deal to end the war. Trump's dithering stand on sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine only further raises the stakes of a proposed summit between Trump and Putin in Hungary in the next few weeks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also planning to meet with his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, in the next few days. After speaking for more than 2.5 hours on Thursday on the phone with Putin, Trump said that he planned to meet with the Russian leader in Hungary in a couple of weeks' time. He also said that his intention was clear: to try and discuss ways to bring an end to Moscow's 3-year invasion of Ukraine. Now, incidentally, in this 2.5-hour-long phone conversation between the presidents of America and Russia, it came just a day before Trump was all set to meet with President Zelensky of Ukraine at the White House. But after days of suggesting that he would allow the sale of Tomahawk missiles to Kiev, Trump then abruptly expressed fears over further arming Ukraine, signaling that he might back off if Putin proves willing to negotiate a diplomatic end. In a social media post on Friday, Trump called his meeting with Zelensky very interesting and very cordial, but he was unwilling to commit to the Tomahawks. Outside the White House, Zelensky responded to Trump's message by arguing that the president was right and that both sides should stop the fighting. But his disappointment around the Tomahawks was visible.
We trust the United States. We trust president that he wants to finish this war. And it's difficult. It's very tough solution. It's understandable why.
Earlier in the week, Trump discussed the idea of sending these long-range missiles to Ukraine during his call with Putin. After that call, he said it had not gone over well with Putin, who had warned Trump that this would trigger a direct conflict between America and Russia. Later, Trump began backing off, saying that he wanted the peace negotiations to start between Russia and Ukraine before discussing sending any Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The decision to hold the phone call with Putin after days of expressing his increasing frustration with the Russian leader and his unwillingness to take substantive steps towards peace signaled a familiar pattern for Trump's handling of the war. On multiple occasions in this year since he came back to office, Trump has come right to the edge of imposing penalties on Russia or giving powerful new weapons to Ukraine, but then he backs off and then he speaks with Putin, he raises hopes for a diplomatic solution, but so far, with little to show for it, Putin has doubled down on the war and Russia's attacks on Ukraine have only gotten more brazen. Back in the spring, Trump had accused Putin of playing with fire in his conduct of the war. He said he was considering imposing sanctions, but 2 weeks later he backtracked and said that he was only testing the waters to see if Putin was serious about the negotiations. Trump never imposes sanctions anyway. Trump then set another deadline in early August for Putin to end the war. Rather than impose sanctions, Trump met with the Russian leader in Alaska, and after the first and only meeting between these two leaders in Trump's second term so far, both the presidents proclaimed that they had made headway towards peace. But Putin continued his assault on Ukraine and he's shown little public willingness to back down. Back at the White House, Zelensky made the case for why a weapons sale of Tomahawks would help end this war. He also proposed an arms exchange in which Ukrainian drones would be traded for the long-range Tomahawks.
3, 2, 1, launch.
The Tomahawks, which can travel 5 times more than the Army tactical missile systems that America has so far given to Ukraine. Modern Tomahawk cruise missiles can strike roughly 900 to 1,100 miles, that's about 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, in common public estimates for Block 4 and Block 5 variants. This would mean that Ukraine can strike deep inside Russia, including in Moscow, if it gets these missiles. But at the very last moment, after a phone call, Trump, as always, has chickened out.